Welcome back to the channel, Kimyo Space Cadets with the top 5 video released. We are back to the scheduled programming. Now, there are a ton of things I want to cover with this review, so do me a favor, like the video. If you enjoyed the video, consider sharing with friends. Now, with that out of the way, let's get started with the review. The title of this episode is The Wolf Knows, Don't Know. The title is deeper than one would realize. It seems that Brent is trying to relay a deeper message than normal. During the Rokash flashback in episode 40, focusing on Leo, who had never encountered Vaal up until that point, he considered him a figure of the imagination, although loosely. Vaal leaves with a looming threat over the life of Leo. Now, let's consider the timeline of Ordeal. At this point in time, Subito Heart did not stay too far away from Elsa and Leo. Once Subito leaves Shay in Leo's care, he would train Shay in order to inherit the Ilios talent. However, Leo knew Shay couldn't do it alone, and whether directly or indirectly, Shay ends up being surrounded by others. While training the Cubs, Leo always had in mind for the Cubs to fight Vaal due to him making a statement to Azam in chapter 2, telling him to use it or lose it, foreshadowing the events to come. So you could assume that after the encounter with the Shadow, Leo is aware of Kane's possible return, and due to them believing in fostering a new generation, he trained Shay and the others in order to take on the battle he may not be there for, ultimately never forgetting Vaal once he had revealed himself. So for Louise, being the oldest of the pack, making this statement and the leader of a clan at a very young age, you can infer he truly understood why Leo was training them so intensely. Louise has his own burden to carry in life, but unfortunately he walks closely with death, just like the rest of his forefathers. So with Vaal threatening the erasure of the hemlock clan, losing the scent will mean the loss of the very lineage he had garnered responsibility for. Now, what do you think the title could mean? And with that out of the way, let's recap the events of the chapter. In the peaceful section of a war-torn battlefield sits Kagaya as he sings Ashdesh Mata Zimbu Zimbu Furikaka Noromo Zimbu. As DekutheArtist interrupts his very peaceful solo concert, Kagaya remarks, very, very unlucky, Louise. Even I don't interfere with Master's plan. When Lord Vaal chooses to fight, it's usually quite strategic. He does not believe in risk, exhaling as he continues indifferently. Thanks to Grimson, he's not at his full strength, so he chose the Kirin boy to gauge how much of his power has returned. He came here for an easy fight, with no intent to even try. But you, Lord Hemlock, you are a force he did not predict. This would anger him, turning to notice a small child with snow white hair in the crevice of Louise's ashen construct as the air begins to get hazy around him, the indifference slowly turning into hatred as we shift back to the battle of ash and blood with Lord Hemlock standing gripping his lance. Leo, surrounded by holy energy, appears behind Louise as he states, "You have enraged the darkness, my son. Are you ready?" Expressing great concern for his master, DekutheArtist continues to surround Vaal as not only to check on his state while also keeping its senses peeled for the enemy. As Louise states, "If I fully enter this state, it will rapidly deplete my chi. I can only feel the shadow slowly absorbing portions of my chi from the atmosphere." As the emotions of the shadow is brought to the light, in his full rage, he can only exclaim, "How do I even do this? How can I fight? Master!" As the title battle takes an unexpected change for Vaal, we are taken back in time to a major change in Louise's life as we shift to a young, afraid, but amazed wolf cub. As Leo states, Louis, interrupting one of the strongest Kimyo in the world, Tevin expresses his concern to his master. What happened to Louis? What did he do? As Shay could only stand there amazed at the progress of Louis, so much so he could only mutter the words, "Is he okay?" Looking at the shift of his newest pupil, Leo remarked, "He proved why he's your seeing, boys. Even at just 17, he has done it. He has become one with his fathers." As we are shown a younger Louise with the ashes of the father melded to his very being. Cutting to the present, as they stare at the enemy of peace, Leo states, "You already know the way, son. Now it is the time to fully step into this state. The eldest of the pack isn't always the leader, but it's wisdom and guidance. By doing this, they too will push past what they thought to be their limits. First shall be the last, and last shall be the first. Being their elder, you will be the first to go, but there is power in this. The way in which your end comes will determine how they live. They have all held themselves back without permission, and there is nothing left to propel them forward. This has always been your task to lead them to their potential." With this in mind, he gives himself more than he ever had for his pack. No, for the very family he was given and chosen for himself. As Louise goes into overdrive as he states, "Chichioya no Hai. Death stands full embrace, as the ash begins to bypass the biological function, slowly melding itself with its Kimyo as it forms a blade made of ashes. Under the sky of a split moon, Louise dons a perfect fusion of Kimyo and talent, and now regarded as a sentinel class Kimyo. Now stands there one who walks with the immortality as well. He says, "Come, Shadow," as the blood begins to lift from the foot of the calculated Kimyo as he slowly begins to lose control, summoning a giant DekutheArtist construct, but undeterred, and with a simple swing of his blade made up of generations of the family members, DekutheArtist is forced out of the way, completely unworthy to stand before the might of the Ashen Fathers. As Vaal cuts through the ash, attempting to overwhelm Louise before he is properly prepared. As Vaal states, "You will wish you had never challenged me, Lord of the Ashes." As he continues, "I will break the bones of an entire generation." As Louise prepares his blade to intercept Vaal, the two Kimyos of immortality clashes, and a crater is created where they stand. Vaal states, "Impressive. You have revealed it all. You hold nothing back. A grand attempt. You hold great power, as did Lord Heart the last time we fought." As Louise prepares to deliver an even heavier blow from his lance, made up of bone and ash, as Vaal states, "But this means nothing to me. Unless you yield to us, then I will make you greater than your pack. Do not die here, Hemlock." Lifting two fingers off his blade to launch a blood pillar, and that would kill any unexpected Kimyo. But completely undeterred, the wolf of ash and bone continued his assault, paying no mind to the damage that he felt. As he states, "It would take a lot more to kill me than you anticipated, Shadow," slamming down his lance in place of the blood monarch as the rebel begins to rise to the sky. Vaal narrowly avoiding the wrath of the fathers as Louise states, "I see what you are doing. You've been attempting to absorb my chi since the beginning," as we see DekutheArtist struggling to absorb chi from Louise's talent to sustain itself, as Louise continues with, "But it has proven quite difficult for you, chi." Furthermore, exclaiming, "Ashes of the Father is more unique than any other chi. You feel it, don't you?" As we see a shell of ash covering the face of Louise, as Louise continues, "As you slowly absorb my chi, piece by piece, you see memories in your thought." As the small pieces of ash and DekutheArtist become colossal hands and mouths, attempting to stalemate one another, while the two lord battle continues. Leaping in the air to take advantage of the sudden break in battle, Louise says, "Visions of past lives, things you do not understand." As Vaal on the ground ready 6 tendrils of DekutheArtist in order to gain an advantage from Louise's inability to maneuver in the air. As Louise states, "My loved ones live with the very chi you consider nothing more than an object to be used. Whilst you control it, it fights against you." As the Lord of Ash breaks through Vaal's feeble attempt at stopping generational power, slamming down with even more force than before as his chi emanates with lightning erupting from the sheer amount of it. As Louise says, "Because this chi lives." As we go back in time, to a time even more precious to Louise than gaining a new profound power. As Louise continues, "Our chi is more than some mere force. Its weight doesn't come from the number of bodies that make up its substance, but from the memories it stores. Every hemlock's love, dream, and purpose. When your blade clashes against it, this is what resists you, Shadow. And soon, my most precious memory will be added to it." As we finally see Louise and his retainers, even at a young age, finishing his acceptance of death with, "The day I met them and became a cub." Returning to the present as the Ashen Lord says, "What can you ever know of family? You are alone, and those around you serve in fear." Enraged as the pebble that has become a mountain standing before the Kimyo whose power is a shell of his former self, even with his attempts of grandeur. As Louise states, "Consider the anger you feel towards me and multiply it. This is what you face when the pack surrounds you. Now tell me, Vajezatha, can a bat hunt wolves?" As a pack of wolves, some with more scar than others, finds their prey, as it attempts to shroud itself in the night, which was not, with the weight of the cubs and the weight of countless clans, smothered out by the monarch. Louise states, "Whenever you feel like you can hide or you've escaped, remember this: the wolf knows, doth know." As this episode of Ordeal comes to an end. Now that the recap is done, there are a ton of things I want to discuss in regards to the subject matter of the episode. The first is K.O.D.E being an anime fan, with him singing the Reckon of Kings song, which was brought up in my comment section of my reaction by Faceless Internal. So I would like to thank you personally for this section of the review. Now, you would think that this is just a throwaway line just to show he is a fan of anime and to show that Brent is a fan of anime, but when looking at the intro, when the chorus plays, they show kings with malicious intent, the king of giants in battle, Oaken slowly rising with his immortality, and a young girl who made friends with the demon. This mirrored the turn of events, as we know Thanatos is a looming threat spirit, while Vaal, who is an immortal soldier for K.O.D.E and leans heavily on his masters for support as his only connection. Now, this situation may mirror the past of Vaal, although unintentionally. In episode 100, we get to peer into the person that wanted nothing but the best for Vaal. Although seeing how far he has come down this dark path, the emotions conveyed not one of regret or pain, but that of comfort and worry of a parent. During this time, Kimyo will be considered evil and hunted down, leading them to be ridiculed. I find it weird that Vaal talent uses his blood as his greatest strength, which would lead me to speculate that he may have had a disease and was heavily into religion at the time. With his impending doom approaching faster than his life, he may have befriended K.O.D.E or made a deal with K.O.D.E at the time. This could lead K.O.D.E to using Cerberus to bestow a power that used his disease-riddled blood into one that grants him into eternal life, ultimately squandering the gift of life that is provided to us by God, and ultimately following K.O.D.E as his disciple. He does have a moniker of the K.O.D.E's last follower, meaning there could have been others in a similar position as Vaal, but all failed to stand the test of time. Could this be a possibility given what we know about Vaal's past, or is this just a reach? Let me know down below. Now, Leo, for me, is the elephant in the room. In previous episodes, we have multiple characters who come back from the dead for a brief moment. The first was Sabito in episode 38. Then we got Janelle in episode 65, the priest in episode 100. We got Leo in episode 136. This anomaly is common in Ordeal and typically used as a representation for responsibility being put on the shoulders to allow the Kimyo to dig deeper into themselves to pull out power that they didn't think they had. However, what is noteworthy in this case is Louise interacting with Leo. Vaal states that Louise's talent is one closest to death, which is why he must have felt Azam approaching doom. So being able to interact with the Holy Spirit while one is fused with the talent close to death is not far-fetched. But how can Leo and all the other come back to interact with those Kimyo physically on the mortal plane? The simple answer is chi, but a simple answer is no fun, so let's do the typical Nara thing and complicate it. In episode 104, Shay poses a philosophical question to Yorn, asking him, where does chi come from? As Yorn says that it flows from the soul. The soul came from God and he allows Kimyos to access the power that emanates off of them. If we use too much of it, we die. Kind of like taking a gift for granted, meaning that even in heaven, their souls emanate chi, which is why they are surrounded by this chi, which is represented by this golden light. So with no biological filter, which is why we see Shay's brother's spirit emanate the exact same holy light, we also have the three known realms of Ordeal as well. We have heaven residing at the top, with the ether being below it, finally leading down to earth. Now I say heaven is above the ether since Thanatos wandered about the ether but had no access to heaven, which could lead me to assume that it's a lower realm. We then have the personalized connection to the ether that the Kimyo have, in which they can be affected by it, and it seems the only thing separating them is the chi limit of the body, almost as if it's given a barrier to protect itself as a failsafe from the ether. So when the spirit comes back, they would send pure chi from heaven through the ether near the Kimyo on earth, at least the one they choose specifically to interact with. So how do you guys view the spirits coming back in Ordeal? Now let's discuss the fandom hype, which is Louise's new death stance. Vaal states that Louise gained immortality through great pain by fusing his talent into every cell of his being, which confirmed what I said in the Power System Explained Part 1 video, where the cell and the talent is fused together in order to overcome the biological limit of death. You could say since the talent is connected to the ether, it would essentially use the connection to break the boundary of the chi limit metaphysically. One would say that Louise's immortality is coming from the same fuel that is powering Shay's body, which is the ether. However, this wouldn't be the truth. Although the talent is fused with every cell, the cell still exists, which would mean the biological limit of chi are still in place, which would lead Louise to say it drains his chi. Since he is emptying every piece of chi each cell is providing, ultimately condemning him to death due to chi exhaustion. This case of immortality is called Sentinel. What's interesting is that they state the previous persons are Kevin and Goro Masamune. What's interesting is that they state the previous persons are Kevin and Goro. And Goro we can regard as a former since he is sealed. However, Kevin being the former is quite interesting. Now we're gonna have to call Dr. Hanzo out for this one again. So Kevin's new form is different from the Sentinel class, given his statement of wanting to be the one who protects the next generation in Leo's stead. It led me to conclude that this initial Sentinel state, once biologically infused with his talent will grant him temporary immortality. However, the limit of chi would remain, which would mean he couldn't maintain it for long. All the power in the world would mean much if you couldn't maintain it due to lack of chi. We established the connection between souls and chi, and so I do consider what Yorn said in episode 104 to be a fact, since Yorn did see the Lord and Leo on his deathbed. Now, the problem of Kevin being similarly immortal and having a chi limit, Kevin would then try to overcome that weakness and take it a step beyond biology and infuse his talent with his soul itself, creating a pure construct of energy. Neither KODE the Storm talent or Kevin Morales' loving brother, but something with an even deeper connection to the ether. So much so that the chi supplied to this body is unable to be controlled due to the maelstrom of energy KODE stumbled upon. Because if he made it successfully into the class, but he failed to do the same thing Leo did, what would you think is the thing specifically that he failed to do? Now back to Louise, when we see the death stance, it was only partially covering his body the first time. This reminded me of Andrea partial scale, where she would sync her soul and the talent together to gain further abilities. Now Jay said this would be because she has Pandora to serve as a medium to allow the souls to sync and allow her to not be overcome by the chi. When she then syncs completely, she then dons the aesthetic of that weapon. We wonder what happens when the talent attempts to meld with a Kimyo, which caused Andrea, if left to her own devices, to rival Gakki, but become a mindless beast. Now Louis' fusion would stop at the biological level in this state. Louis is being compared to Shay in the war state. One would assume that they would be on similar levels. However, this may not be the case. Louis is stronger than war state Shay temporarily. Vaal is obviously not at the same strength that he was in the fight with Shay. However, Vaal never took Shay seriously at that point, only using Dothanil's physical body to combat him, while due to his weakness, he has used the blood constructs to combat Louis' talent. You could also say that Shay walked so Louis could run in this fight, also giving him the tactical advantage. Louis' experience as a Kimyo is leading this fight as well. When Vaal is close to power with a Kimyo, he relies on his experience upper hand, as we see with his clash with Yorn. Although Yorn bested him physically, he would use out of the ordinary tactics to deal damage, and if Yorn wasn't an immortal, it would be regarded as fatal. Leo makes remarks that the last go will be the first and the first go will be the last. This is definitely Brent providing us with sauce for the ending conflict of Ordeal while being ambiguous to those who have only read weekly and not paid attention to his interviews. Now with Louis to be the last one to join the wolf pack, that would also mean he would be the first to die. He is foreshadowed to die since season 1, since it stated the first would be the last, which would lead me to believe that in this holy war of biblical proportions that all of the wolf cubs will die, with Shay being the final villain. This may guarantee the first will go last spot. Then Tevin, although not one of the great talents, could be the one for stopping the new embodiment of Thanatos' will by being the one true friend that Shay has. We see this is one of the problems with Cain. Cain started this path because he wanted a friend, while Thanatos started his path after being flaunted with power by his brother. So he grew on his own. In belief of being superior, he will only look at others besides himself and those adjacent of his power as cattle for his palate, which would reflect the treatment shown by the wisest of the brothers, KODE, telling them to let humans praise them. There is no harm in that, which will ultimately cause the very problem itself, which is Thanatos' perspective of humans. Now, Louis talks about the weight of his ashes being from love, dreams, and the ashes themselves. I really enjoyed this moment because it mirrors the statement that Minamoto no Osamu said in episode 77, which is that weight means nothing to the power that they have. However, in this case, he's talking about the weight he is displaying, not the weight he is holding up. Even now, he accepts his death but doesn't want to burden those left behind. So there is some weight there. This could lead me to believe that this is not the moment where Louise dies. I'm going to keep reiterating that. And maybe he gets maimed instead, but he survives the night, contrary to what Brent is trying to set up. Now, with every episode review, you know we have to discuss the art. If you know me, then you know what panel it is before I even say it, which is the wolves hunting the bat. One panel displays so much imagery of the story up until this point, which may fly over a lot of people's heads. However, I could be here even longer than an hour for this review, and I ain't moving like that for the editing process. So let me just sum up my thoughts and then talk about the wolves themselves. Now, this panel represents the effects of Leo in the later half of his life, leading to his death, sacrificing everything to train the new generation in order to continue the hunt he may be too old for when he's not here to see it, as I said earlier. Now, each wolf represents a cub, so let's talk about it because I feel Brent spent time on how he wanted to display each panel. We have Yukiko, not showing any malice whatsoever, almost almost ignorant as she is displaying a winter coat reflecting her personality to blend into her environment. We do get with the previous episodes thing that she keeps a strong face to keep up with those around her, and it represents that in this picture. Next to her, always protecting his sister, a scared cub who only knows pain, and the cub shows aggression against the bat personally, and unlike the big dog, is willing to leap and almost sacrifice itself to end this one prey, reflecting that it doesn't understand that there may be other hunts after this prey. As we see the wolf representing Leo, the father figure, knowing the danger ahead, although he has one paw lifted, it shows his caution since it's not pressed outward like Shay's wolf, going to show his wisdom as well. Next to Leo with the eyes covered in brown is Tevin. He is the closest to Shay, so they have similar coats. If you look closely, Brent took the time to change the coat pattern of his, observing the state of the bat, but also those around him. He isn't the war-torn cub, but one who is gauging the danger. Another reason this represents as double imagery is the case where Shay is on the left of the wolf, representing the opposite ideal of Leo, while Tevin is on the right, representing that he is following the teachings of Leo a lot closer. And if you see my top 5 video, you know Shay keeps a wall between him and Tevin, and is represented by them being separated by the ideals of Leo. We then have a Zom in front of Tevin. Since Vaal was coming to get a Zom, it would make sense to be the target of the bat. We also see that it is the smallest wolf represented in this perspective shot, meaning he may not be the actual smallest, but to show that he's the youngest cub. That's why Brent drew it like. As we know, the last is the first, so we then have Louis cub on the right. Unlike every other cub there, he still seems to be in motion, almost as if he is just arriving. We then see him watching over the cub that represents a Zom, and just like in this conflict, we'll jump in the way in order to protect the youngest. Both Vaal and the wolves are in stalemate, whereas wrong move for either party can end up in annihilation. This could make this panel one of my favorites in the entirety of Ordeal. This episode is a solid 8, but if I put my bias in it with the second to last panel, it will be easily a 9. Anyway, Space Cadets, let me know what you think about the format of the video. What are your thoughts down below of this episode? This review turned out longer than I thought it would be, to be honest with you, but hey, it's the leader of the Cosmic Armada, librarian of KODE archives, wolphnara. Enjoy your day, night, or evening. Make sure y'all do the thingy. I'm out.